The Blind Man and His Perfect Vision, a Fable for All Ages by Meri Aaron Walker. Dedication to all of you who have seen the hardest of times and then lived to see the sun rise again. This work is copyright 2025 by Meri Aaron Walker. All rights reserved. Men go to war to prove something. Women go to war because someone forgot something. Something important. Something sacred. And now they have to remind everyone with steel and consequence. Joe Nichols. Long ago, in the kingdom of Veridian, there stood a magnificent palace of mirrors, a 1,000-year-old structure where the wisest counselors reflected upon the realm's complexities before offering guidance to the people. Each mirror showed a different aspect of truth. The mirror of consequences revealed the future effects of decisions. The mirror of perspective displayed how choices appeared to different citizens. The great mirror of humility reminded all who gazed upon it what they did not yet understand. For generations, this system brought prosperity. Leaders approached decisions with careful deliberation, acknowledging the vastness of their ignorance before claiming wisdom. One year, a plague passed through the land, killing many men, women, and children. Finally, it passed. But the people who had survived the plague grew restless. Why must everything take so long? They complained. Why don't the counselors speak with us too? Why can't our leaders just act for us with the confidence we crave? Then came Valorious the Bold, a man who promised to restore Veridian's former glory. The mirrors are tools of the weak, he declared. They fill strong minds with doubt and paralyze action with endless reflection. I will shatter them all and rule by pure instinct, the way our ancestors did in the Golden Age. The crowd cheered as Valorious took a great hammer to the mirrors. With each crash, he felt more powerful, more certain. The fragments scattered. In the tiny shards, Valorious saw only his own reflection multiplied. Confident, decisive, unwavering. Valorious disbanded the Council of Wise Elders, calling them relics of a broken system. He appointed his most enthusiastic supporters to govern by choosing loyalty over experience. Who needs advisors when leadership comes naturally to the truly gifted, he proclaimed. At first, the people celebrated. Decisions came swiftly, policies changed daily. Action replaced contemplation. But without the mirror's guidance, each choice bred unforeseen disasters. Crops failed from ignored weather patterns. Trade collapsed from dismissed diplomatic wisdom. The treasury emptied through confident miscalculations. As Veridian crumbled, Valorious grew only more certain of his righteousness. In the tiny shards he'd kept, he saw his reflection and mistook it for the whole truth. These problems prove we haven't destroyed enough of the old ways, he insisted, smashing what remained of the ancient institutions. It didn't take long before Veridian fell to ruins. Dark times and hunger seized the people. In the dark of night, Valorious stole away. He died soon after. With Valorious gone, his minions scattered to the four winds. Slowly, the people of Veridian resumed caring for one another again. Eventually, they built a new palace of mirrors, where they told one another the stories of their ancestors and brought back the council of elders. They discovered again that true wisdom begins with seeing how much one cannot see. They reaffirmed together the wisdom of their ancestors. The confident who refuse to look beyond their own reflection are doomed to mistake the smallest shard of truth for the entire mirror. Today, when leaders grow too certain of their own brilliance, the citizens whisper, "Beware the broken mirror. It shows you only yourself." Once again, the Veridians teach their children, those who know the least often speak the loudest, for they have never gazed into the mirror of humility to see the vastness of their ignorance. The Blind Man and His Perfect Vision is a modern fable that shows what can happen when the all-too-human cognitive bias, referred to these days as the Dunning-Kruger Effect, convinces us that we or other humans have expertise that we or they don't actually have. It takes more than an hour's worth of Google searches, a Fox News broadcast, or a chat with AI to become an expert on something. And it takes more than just wanting to be an influencer to be capable of leading others in productive, sustainable directions. I wrote this fable as a 75-year-old American woman, someone who once called herself a proud American, watching our nation be taken apart by a wildly charismatic man who has lived his entire life inside the Dunning-Kruger effect. He doesn't know as much as he says he does, and he has no idea. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect, one of over 100 well-documented cognitive biases, meaning errors in the ways human beings think. Named in 1999 by two social scientists whose research sparked decades of further study, the Dunning-Kruger Effect describes a simple and devastating pattern. The less someone actually knows, the more certain they feel. Our president isn't the only one. This bias runs through ordinary human life every day. But here's what scares me. With AI accelerating towards us, if we can't train ourselves to notice when the Dunning-Kruger effect is shrinking our thinking, we won't be able to fight it. We won't even see it coming. The 12-minute podcast embedded here in this fable goes deeper. I hope it gives you something real to work with for your own thinking and for the people you love.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to unpack a simple fable, one of those stories like you heard as a kid. But this one holds a really, I think, profoundly relevant lesson for right now, for our complex world. Our starting point is Meri Aaron Walker's piece, The Blind Man and His Perfect Vision. And this deep dive, it isn't just about a story, it's about the real dangers of unchecked confidence, that tendency we all have sometimes to be ignorant of our own ignorance. Mm-hmm. And maybe most importantly, why understanding this is critical now, especially as we get tangled up with powerful new tech like AI.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? How an old story can shine such a bright light on, well, modern psychology, things like the Dunning-Kruger effect, our personal blind spots. So our mission today really is to explore how self-awareness, or maybe the lack of it, can actually lead to, well, downfall, personal, societal. And crucially, we want to look at what tangible steps you can actually take to build up what we call intellectual humility, that understanding of what you don't know and why that might just be your biggest strength.
Okay, so let's dive into this fable. It's set in this kingdom, Veridian, prosperous place, apparently famous for its palace of mirrors. Sounds grand. But it wasn't just architecture. It was like the core of their wisdom system. They had these wise counselors, and they'd use different mirrors to figure things out. The mirror of consequences, showing future effects. The mirror of perspective, reflecting how choices looked to different people. And the big one, the great mirror of humility, which was basically a constant reminder to leaders, hey, there's a lot you don't know. And this system, it worked for generations. Kept Veridian prosperous because leaders were, well, humble. They acknowledged their ignorance. But then things changed. A plague hit. People got restless. They wanted action, confidence, less talk, more doing. And that's when Valorious the Bold shows up, promises swift solutions, glory days return. And he famously declares, the mirrors are tools of the weak. Said they fill minds with doubt, paralyze action. So he takes a hammer and smashes them, just like that. And in the fragments, what does he see? Just himself. Multiplied, confident, decisive, unwavering, or so he thought. He gets rid of the wise counselors, calls them relics. Appoints his biggest fans instead. Loyalty over experience, right? His thinking was, who needs advisors when you're naturally gifted?
Yeah, and at first people loved it. Decisions were fast. Policies changed like the weather. Action, finally. But, and this is the key part, without those mirrors, without that reflection, every swift choice started breeding disaster. Unforeseen stuff. Crops failed, they ignored the old weather wisdom. Trade collapsed, dismissed diplomacy. The treasury, empty. Confident miscalculations, one after another. The kingdom started crumbling. And here's the really chilling part about Valorious. As things got worse, he didn't doubt himself. No, he got more certain of his own righteousness. He'd look into those tiny broken shards he kept and mistake his own reflection for the whole truth. It's quite tragic, really. He kept saying, these problems just prove we haven't destroyed enough of the old ways. So he smashed the remaining institutions, convinced they were the problem. And that led straight to Veridian's ruin and Valorious's own demise, a victim of his own certainty.
Wow. That is a powerful story. And kind of scary when you think about it. The lessons are pretty stark, aren't they? True wisdom isn't about knowing it all. It starts with seeing how much you can't see. That's a warning, isn't it? If you refuse to look beyond your own reflection, you'll mistake a tiny piece of truth for the whole mirror, like that whispered warning. Beware the broken mirror. It shows you only yourself. Makes you wonder how much Valorious is in us sometimes, or maybe in leaders we see today. So, okay, beyond the fable, what does this mean for us? This story, it perfectly sets up this psychological thing called the Dunning-Kruger Effect, right? So basically, it's a cognitive bias. People tend to overestimate their abilities, especially when they actually lack skill or knowledge in that area. And the flip side is people who are highly skilled sometimes underestimate themselves. They think, oh, this is easy, so it must be easy for everyone.
Exactly. It's this weird paradox. The least qualified people are often the most confident. It links to this thing called illusory superiority, where people rate themselves as better than average to a degree that, well, it just doesn't add up mathematically.
Like the driving example you mentioned.
That's the classic one. 88% of U.S. drivers think they're above average. Or software engineers rating themselves in the top 5%. Clearly, not everyone can be in the top half, let alone the top 5%.
You know, it's funny, realizing you probably suffer from this somewhere makes you feel human, because we all do. And what's really interesting is how this beginner's bubble can actually come from something good, our ability to figure stuff out. But the problem is, as you get just a little bit of knowledge or practice, your confidence can shoot up way faster than your actual competence.
David Dunning calls that phase the killing zone in high-stakes jobs. Think pilots. After maybe 600, 800 hours, they get overconfident, start making mistakes.
Right, or surgeons, after 15, 20 surgeries, they relax, maybe get a bit too sure.
And that overconfidence, that's where our blind spots really come into play. These are the parts of ourselves that other people see plain as day, but we just don't. Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen have this great concept, the gap map. It shows how our intentions, which might be totally pure, often don't line up with our actual behavior. And that gap, it leaks out.
Gap map. I like that. So our good intentions might be causing problems we're blind to. And this is where those leaky cues fit in, right? The things we give away without realizing.
Exactly. We're often unaware of our leaky face, expressions. Others see them, we don't.
Or leaky tone.
Right. You can't really hear your own tone of voice accurately, like an opera singer needing a coach.
And then leaky patterns are big habits that seem obvious to others, but we miss them.
Yeah, think about anger. Sometimes the person feeling it is the last to know how visible it is. It's very real to everyone else, though. And these blind spots get amplified by a couple of biases. First, situation versus character. When we mess up, we blame the situation. Oh, the traffic was terrible. But when someone else does the same thing, we often blame their character. They're just always late.
Okay. I see that.
Second one, maybe even bigger. Impact versus intent. We judge ourselves by our good intentions. I meant well. But others judge us by the impact of our actions, regardless of intent. That gap can be huge and totally invisible to us.
Okay, so this is all fascinating psychology, but why should you, listening right now, really care? Well, the impacts of being overconfident, of not seeing yourself accurately, they're pretty significant. It leads straight to poor decisions. Taking on things you're just not equipped for. Affects your work, your relationships, your finances, everything, really.
And think back to Valorious again. It's a perfect, if extreme, example. His resistance to feedback, refusing to see others' expertise, relying purely on gut feeling, oversimplifying everything. These weren't just personality quirks. They were cognitive biases actively destroying his kingdom. It shows how these things, if you don't check them, can lead to, catastrophe.
But on the flip side, accurate self-perception.
Yeah.
That's powerful stuff. It's really the foundation for growth, for fulfillment. It's not just about avoiding mistakes. It actually boosts real confidence, your willingness to try things, your resilience. When you understand yourself better, setbacks aren't personal failures. They're chances to learn. You can keep going, even grow when things get tough.
Which brings us to a really critical point now. How is all this connected to technology, especially AI? David Dunning himself predicts we'll see many news stories written about codependency with ChatGPT.
Codependency with ChatGPT. Wow.
Yeah, because these models, they can be anything or anybody you want it to be. So it's easy to over-rely on them, get a false sense of security. And if you have blind spots about what you actually know, if you don't know what you don't know, you might just blindly trust what an AI tells you without questioning it, without validating it.
So our human blind spots could get amplified by AI. That sounds dangerous, like Valorious running off the rails thinking he knows it all.
Potentially, yes. If we're not careful to cultivate that self-awareness.
Okay, so if our own ignorance is invisible, how do we fix that? How do we escape the trap? David Dunning himself says he's the last person you should ask about when do I fall victim to the Dunning-Kruger effect, which really highlights it, right?
Absolutely. It underscores the need for outside input. This whole thing isn't about reaching perfection, it's about self-correction, a continuous process. And the bigger idea here, the thread connecting all this, is intellectual humility. It's really about recognizing genuinely that your beliefs might be wrong and being truly willing to consider other views, and importantly, to just admit, I don't know, sometimes takes patience, tolerating frustration, asking yourself, am I really sure? How do I actually know this?
Right. So what can people actually do? Are there concrete strategies?
Thankfully, yes. First, and maybe the most crucial, seek external feedback. Actively ask people you trust, friends, family, colleagues, for their honest opinions, strengths, weaknesses.
You need the supportive mirrors, but also the honest mirrors, right? The
Right.
ones that show you maybe what you don't want to see, but need to.
Exactly. It's why getting a second opinion is so vital, especially for big decisions like medical stuff. If opinions differ, you want to hit pause.
And in teams, having a devil's advocate can be incredibly valuable.
Immense value. Someone whose job it is to poke holes, find flaws, and also just learn by watching others. We're often better at seeing their mistakes than our own.
Okay, so feedback is key. What else?
Second, self-reflection and metacognition. Thinking about your thinking. Journaling can help spot patterns in how you see yourself. Or try that how do I know what I know activity, like with ambiguous pictures, the duck rabbit thing.
Oh yeah, the optical illusions.
Right. You see a duck, someone else sees a rabbit, and they can justify it. It forces you to see your perception isn't the only reality. That's humility right there.
What about that pre-mortem idea?
Oh, that's a great one. Before you start something big, imagine it failed spectacularly. Then work backward. Why did it fail? You uncover risks you missed in your initial optimism. And just regularly reflect on statements like, am I willing to admit if I don't know something?
Makes sense. So feedback, reflection. What's third?
Third, embrace a growth mindset and commit to continuous learning. This is huge. Seeing challenges as stepping stones, not roadblocks. Learning from mistakes.
And Dunning's point about not confusing experience with expertise.
Crucial. Just because you've done something a lot doesn't mean you've mastered it.
Or mistaking expertise for wisdom. Knowing a lot about one thing doesn't mean you know how or when to apply it wisely.
Exactly. Stay curious.
Yeah.
Keep learning.
Okay, and are there any other practical techniques?
Yeah, a few practical techniques and mindsets. There's the yes, no, maybe thing used in teaching.
Mm-hmm.
People physically move to show if they agree, disagree, or are unsure. Then they discuss. It highlights different viewpoints really clearly.
Interesting.
You can even record yourself speaking sometimes. Hear your tone, see your mannerisms. It can be revealing.
Oh, I bet. A bit cringy maybe, but revealing.
Definitely. Also, set realistic goals. Compare yourself to objective standards, not just other people, and work on positive self-talk, reframing negative thoughts, challenge them, find constructive alternatives. Look, if we pull this all together, developing accurate self-perception, cultivating that intellectual humility, it's a lifelong journey. It really is. It takes constant effort, introspection, being okay with being uncomfortable sometimes, and being open to challenges from outside. It's about growth.
Yeah, and I love how David Dunning puts it. Living with Dunning-Kruger, and we all do live with Dunning-Kruger, he says you don't want to think in terms of absolutes. You want to think in terms of ideas or bets and be willing to change course.
Mm-hmm. Being comfortable with being wrong or with experts being wrong.
He even suggests that little bit of anxiety you feel when you're out of your depth, that feeling of, I might screw this up, that can actually be the best protective you have. That humility keeps you sharp. So for you listening, for the learner, the curious mind, here's a final thought to chew on. In this world where AI is getting smarter and more involved in our lives, what hidden areas of your own ignorance might be the riskiest right now? And how could acknowledging those blind spots actually become your greatest superpower?